This is the Kate Daly Show.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Kate Daly Show, and I have several guests. I have Randy Parker. I have Kent Singleton. It's an eminent domain land grab. And let me just tell you, I also have Chelcie Hope, and Chelsea's going to tie this in to what's going on in the UN. Tomorrow, I have Susan and Melissa. I have guests this week and next, Dennis Prager among them, all kinds of guests coming on the show. And of course, Jim Lee's coming back on Thursday to talk about Milton and so many other guests. So I just want to say, Chelcie Hope is an avid researcher, and she's been on the show several times with me. I've really appreciated her research. Talk to me about the UN and how this ties in.
Yeah, so, and I know Marlo Oakes has been, I believe, on your national show
Yes.
a few times about the 30 by 30 agenda and the natural asset companies.
Mm-hmm.
And really what this is Biden's America the Beautiful 30 by 30 initiative is to turn 30% of land and water, so not just land, but also water, over to kind of wildland areas. So it's really the UN Wildlands project that this comes from.
Ooh.
And so they want to basically to save the planet because of climate change,
Oh my
right?
gosh.
Turn all of this land back over to the wildland area and then start pushing all of the rural. And we're seeing this, the farmers, they're really attacking the farmers, pushing them into those urban areas where those 15-minute cities are, right? So
Yes.
one of the things that he's doing is there's an agenda called One Water, and we really should talk about this more on another show, but there are two parts to the One Water agenda. And One Water is Biden has his U.S. global water strategy, which is partnered with UN One Water, and it's basically for global governance of all waterways. And how, one waterway in America somehow, because this groundwater sinks down into the ocean, it can affect water all the way in Africa, right? So there's two parts to this. There's due to water conservation issues, because you and I have talked about the drought. It's a man-made drought, but because of climate change, we're going to run out of water. We're all going to die. And so part of this water strategy is to basically come in and redistribute water resources. And with the infrastructure that they're putting in, that they're having farmers, put in, and Randy mentioned this, basically you're going to have rainwater run. So there are certain contaminants that are tied into all of this, and things like fertilizers. You've got rainwater runoff hitting a farm and taking it downstream, and it's contaminating somebody else's land. So they're getting farmers and people to put in this water infrastructure for water conservation right now, and they're passing laws to do this in Utah to measure water. But it's sending water quality data to basically these data hubs to NASA satellites, and NASA has a whole presentation on implementing the Clean Water Act. So basically what happened about 3 weeks ago is the state of Virginia, the EPA was able to come in via the Clean Water Act and take over the complete regulatory powers of the entire Virginia State Department of Agriculture. And so they're trying to implement this Clean Water Act in any way they can. And in 1972, when the United Nations Conference for the United Nations Environmental Program was created, they also passed a bunch of laws specifically on the Clean Water Act. So part of the issue with this 30 by 30 agenda is, and we've talked about this, they're trying to expand, any kind of national or state monuments, any habitats, riparian areas, but also recreational areas, which we're talking about on Kent's property. They're trying to expand access to that right now. But when you look at Biden's federal plan for resilience, it talks about basically removing that access being equitably redistributed via vulnerable populations. So to take from the white man and give to other urban areas, right? So they are doing everything they can right now. They want to expand these recreational areas and these habitats, specifically with the intent that it will all eventually be turned over to that Wildlands project. So to 30 by 30, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So they're doing everything they can to come in and use outdated navigable, federal law. This is completely unprecedented. But they want to use this navigable water law when there's no commerce or trade taking place on Kent's property via recreation But what they're doing is any way possible, they're going to implement if they can expand these navigable waterways and allow this to happen,
right.
they're going to also implement the Clean Water Act, because the Clean Water Act is tied to navigable waters as well.
Oh
so it's going to
gosh.
start a whole spiral chain, not just an eminent domain, but they are planning a global crisis of like a global water contamination issue, where the World Health Organization and EPA and WHO have to come on in and basically manage all global waters. And then they're going to take over those waters and redistribute them, quote unquote, equitably, which we see how well that goes with, communist type regimes when they control the water among the people. And so there is a kind of a bigger overreaching agenda here. And this is just a small part of them trying to take regulations over waterways in any way that they can.
That's what I was going to ask you about. That's what I was going to ask you about. They had this preoccupation, if everybody was noticing, with native land, Native American lands. And yes. And so this is part of it too, isn't it? Is trying to grab those lands too. Correct?
Yeah. I know all of that. And they have entire white papers on that, all of the tribal land. They're getting them to turn their land into habitats and wildlife refuges. And all of that is going to be turned over to 30 by 30. So they're pulling the water in any way they can. And the problem is they've done a great job taking rights to the land. The water law in the state, and especially in the western states, states that the state owns the rights to the water, right? So the state's always going to own the water, but the federal government is doing everything they can to come in and implement controls. So for instance, and Randy, I know you've mentioned this, the U.S. Department of Fish and Wildlife Services has partnered. They've come in and basically talked to farmers and said that, hey, we'll renew your grazing permit 10 years down the road if you enter into a joint water right with us. And what happens is 10 years down the road, they don't renew their grazing permit. They basically get pushed off their land because they can't be productive and survive. And so they let go of that water right, and it automatically defaults to control of the federal government, because this U.S. agency
they've entered into a contract with them. Yes, for joint.
So they're doing everything they can to take over water rights.
Randy?
Sorry, go ahead, Randy.
Well, it is so frustrating that they hold all the cards, because those permits are 10-year renewals, and so they tell them, well, we'll renew if you'll have joint ownership of your water, and then 10 years later they don't renew again, so the federal government ends up owning that water right. One of the things that a lot of people across the country need to be aware of when the Clean Water Act
30 seconds.
and the waters of the United States come into discussion is the United States is trying to define a significant nexus. Well, in the Upper Idaho Panhandle case, the Sackett case, they literally said significant nexus to the waters of the United States was rainwater falling on their property. That's how far they're trying to overreach to get control of our waters, that there's a significant nexus, therefore they have control.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you, Chelcie. Thank you, Ken Singleton. So sorry you're going through this, and I really appreciate all three of you, the diligent work, thank you, on keeping people aware of what's going on so we can protect ourselves too. And be faithful, be fearless. I'll see you back here tomorrow with Susan and Melissa. See you tomorrow, KateDalleyRadio.com.
Hey, this is Stephen Gage with Garage Doors.